Scaphism. The most horrifying punishment ever recorded in human history was not fire, not the blade, and not the rope. It was being strapped to a wooden boat, covered in honey, and left alive on a stagnant pond, while insects slowly consumed your living body for weeks. The ancient Persians called it Scaphism. The victim was sandwiched between two wooden boats, force-fed milk and honey until violent diarrhea set in, then coated in honey from head to toe. Flies came first, then wasps, then maggots hatched inside the flesh. The victim floated there, fully conscious, unable to move, while their own body was eaten around them. The only surviving account describes a man lasting 17 days before death finally arrived. Ling Chi. The punishment was so calculated and so deliberately cruel that trained professionals spent years mastering it, slicing a living human body thousands of times, keeping the victim conscious long after any normal person should have died. Ling Chi was the official execution method of Imperial China from the 10th century until 1905. A government-appointed executioner would begin with the fingers, then the toes, then the nose, ears, and cheeks, removing flesh in small, deliberate slices, careful never to hit an artery too early. The number of cuts was recorded officially. Some executions lasted hours. Opium was sometimes given, not out of mercy, but to keep the victim conscious longer. The last recorded Ling Chi execution was photographed in 1905. Those photographs still exist. The Blood Eagle. The most physically violent execution ever recorded involved cutting a man's back open while still breathing, snapping every rib away from his spine, and pulling his lungs out while his heart was still beating. The Blood Eagle was a Viking ritual execution mentioned in Norse sagas. The victim was held face down and restrained. A blade opened the back along the spine. Then, using hands or a tool, each rib was snapped away from the backbone individually. The lungs were pulled through the openings and spread across the back like wings. The victim remained conscious through the early stages of the procedure. Flaying alive, the punishment that made conquered kings beg for death before it even began. A sharp blade pressed against living skin, then pulled slowly, peeling the entire surface of a human body away in large sheets, while the person remained fully conscious. The Assyrians used flaying as a political weapon. When they conquered a city, the enemy king was sometimes skinned alive publicly, and the removed skin was nailed to the city wall as a message to everyone watching. The process began at the face or the back. A skilled executioner could keep the victim alive for hours. Without skin, the human body loses temperature regulation, fluid retention, and infection resistance almost immediately. Death came slowly, through shock, fluid loss, or infection, never quickly. Rat torture. The punishment was so unbearable that most victims lost their minds before the rats even broke through the skin. A sealed metal bucket of starving rats strapped against a living human stomach, heated from outside until the only way out was through the body in front of them. The method was simple and required almost no equipment. A bucket or clay pot filled with large rats was strapped tightly against the victim's bare abdomen. Heat was then applied to the outside of the container. As the temperature inside rose, the rats panicked. Trapped with no other exit, they began chewing through the only thing available: human flesh, then muscle, then organs. The victim was kept fully restrained and conscious throughout. Sawing in half, the execution method specifically designed to keep the human brain alive and conscious as long as physically possible. Hanging the victim upside down by their ankles and sawing slowly upward from the groin, while the inverted body kept blood flooding into the brain. Most execution methods have one flaw: the victim loses consciousness too quickly. The people who designed this understood that perfectly. Upside down, gravity pulled every drop of blood directly into the skull. The brain stayed oxygenated. The mind stayed present. The saw entered at the groin and worked upward through the abdominal cavity, through the organs, through the chest. No fading, no drifting, no merciful blackout at the critical moment. The person felt every single centimeter with complete clarity. It was not execution. It was engineering applied to human suffering. The breaking wheel. The punishment where death was never the point. Suffering was, as an iron-tipped hammer moved methodically around a wooden wheel, shattering every single bone in the human body one at a time, while the victim remained fully awake and unable to move. The condemned was stripped and spread-eagled across the wheel, every limb tied to the spokes. The executioner began at the extremities, the shins, forearms, working deliberately inward, bone by bone, joint by joint. Every strike measured, every break intentional. The crowd heard the bones going. After every major bone was shattered, the victim was still alive, a destroyed, collapsed thing draped across the wheel, limbs bent at angles they were never designed to reach. The body was raised on a pole. Birds came. It was not punishment, it was a statement. Impalement. The punishment was so terrifying that entire armies surrendered without a fight the moment they saw the forest of stakes ahead, a sharpened pole driven through the living human body with deliberate precision, avoiding every vital organ, keeping the victim alive and conscious on the stake for days. Vlad the Impaler did not invent impalement, he perfected it into pure psychological warfare. The tip was rounded slightly so it pushed organs aside rather than rupturing them on entry. Inserted through the base of the body and pushed slowly upward, the goal was for the tip to emerge near the shoulder without touching the heart or lungs. A person impaled this way survived for days. Vlad once impaled 20,000 people across a single battlefield. When the Ottoman army arrived and saw the horizon filled with dying bodies on stakes, their commander turned around without engaging. Vlad never fired a single arrow that day. The head crusher. The punishment where the executioner never needed to raise a weapon, just tighten a screw slowly. As a metal vise compressed the human skull until the jaw shattered, the cheekbones collapsed, the eyes burst from their sockets, and the skull itself cracked open. A metal cap sat over the top of the skull. A chin rest held the jaw below. A threaded screw connected the two. The executioner turned the screw. That was all. The jaw went first, teeth shattering, bone folding inward. Then the cheekbones. Then the orbital bones gave way, and the eyes were forced outward from the face. Then the skull itself began to deform. The brain had nowhere to go. The perfect operating speed was slow, deliberate, 1/4 turn at a time, waiting between each rotation to allow the full effect to register before continuing. Crushing by elephant. The punishment used by emperors, kings, and warlords across Asia and the Middle East for over 2,000 years, placing a condemned human being flat on the ground and directing a trained war elephant to begin with the limbs, move to the torso, and finish with the skull, in full public view, in front of thousands of watching people who understood exactly what they were seeing. War elephants were among the most intelligent and trainable animals ever used by human militaries. That intelligence is exactly what made them so effective as execution tools. They could be directed with precision. An elephant instructed to crush slowly would crush slowly. It would place one foot on a forearm and apply pressure gradually, feeling the resistance, increasing the force, holding until the bone gave, then move to the next limb. The condemned could not move, could not pull away, could only wait for the next placement. The torso came after the limbs were destroyed. The ribcage collapsed under a weight no human structure was built to resist. Internal organs ruptured, and then the skull, placed carefully under the foot of an animal weighing several tons, was simply pressed into the ground. Rulers across India, Persia, Carthage, and Southeast Asia used this method not just as execution, but as theater. The message was not just that you were being killed, the message was that something incomprehensibly large and powerful had been personally directed to destroy you, and it obeyed. The brazen bull, the punishment invented by a man who was then immediately locked inside his own creation as its first victim, a hollow bronze bull heated from beneath until the person sealed inside was slowly roasted alive, their screams converted by internal pipes into the sound of a bellowing animal, so the crowd outside heard nothing human at all. The brazen bull was designed in ancient Greece by a craftsman named Perillus, who brought it as a gift to the tyrant Phalaris of Acragas. The device was a hollow bronze statue of a bull, life-sized, with a door in the side large enough to push a person through. Beneath the statue, a fire was lit. Bronze conducts and retains heat with brutal efficiency. The interior temperature climbed slowly, not an instant death but a gradual one, giving the person inside time to fully understand what was happening to them. Perillus had engineered a tube system connecting the interior to the bull's nostrils and mouth. The screams of the person inside were acoustically transformed by these tubes into sounds resembling a bull in distress. The crowd gathered around heard an animal. They heard nothing recognizably human. Phalaris examined the device and asked Perillus to demonstrate how the sound system worked by placing his own head inside. The moment Perillus did, Phalaris locked the door and lit the fire beneath. The inventor of the brazen bull became its very first victim. Phalaris himself was later executed inside the same device by his own people. Blinding and mutilation. The punishment the Byzantine Empire considered more terrifying than death itself. A systematic and deliberate destruction of the human face, removing the eyes with hot iron, slicing away the nose, cutting off the ears, and sometimes removing the tongue, leaving the victim alive, breathing, and completely unrecognizable for the rest of their natural life. Death was too clean, too final. A dead rival was a closed chapter. A blinded, disfigured, mutilated rival was a living warning, breathing, existing, walking through the world as proof of what happened to people who challenged the wrong throne. The Byzantines understood power with a sophistication that most civilizations never matched, and they understood that the most devastating thing you could do to a powerful man was not end him but unmake him. The eyes were removed first, sometimes gouged with fingers, sometimes burned out with heated metal instruments pressed directly against the open eye. The nose was sliced away at the bridge, leaving the nasal cavity exposed. The ears were cut from the sides of the head. The tongue was sometimes removed through the open mouth with a blade. What remained was a person who could no longer see, could no longer be recognized, could no longer speak clearly, could no longer present themselves to the world as anything other than a destroyed thing. Emperors, generals, and princes were subjected to this instead of execution. They lived for decades afterward. That was precisely the point.